There is a moment in every Capricorn life when you realize, with a kind of quiet astonishment, that what is happening to you would have broken almost anyone else, and you are still standing. The crisis arrived the way crises do. The loss, the betrayal, the long illness, the financial collapse, the family rupture, the version of catastrophe specific to your life. And you watched it happen. You watched yourself absorb it. You watched the people around you assume you would collapse the way they would have collapsed. And somehow, without quite knowing how, you remained upright. Not undamaged, not unmoved, but upright, functional. Still doing the daily things that needed doing. Still showing up at the office or the kitchen or the place where the children waited. And in some quiet inner room, you wondered, why am I still standing? Why has this not broken me the way it would have broken everyone I have ever known? Tonight I am going to show you the answer. And the answer is not what you have been told. The popular explanations reach for two answers, and both are wrong. The first explanation is willpower. They say you are simply more disciplined, more determined, mentally tougher, that you have trained yourself to endure through some superior act of will. The second explanation is repression. They say you do not actually feel the crisis the way other people feel it, that you have walled yourself off, that the apparent endurance is really just emotional distance. Both explanations contain a fragment of something, and both miss the actual mechanism, because both assume the endurance is a mental quality, something you do with your mind, something psychological. The truth is that your endurance is not psychological. It is structural. It is written into the body itself, into the actual material the body is made of, by the planet that rules you. And until you see this clearly, you will keep thinking your survival is a personality feature that other people could replicate if they only tried harder. They cannot. Their bodies are not built the way yours is built. To see this clearly, we have to go to a layer of astrology that modern popular reading has almost entirely forgotten. To the medieval physicians and astrologers who worked with a doctrine called Melothesia. Melothesia, from the Greek for limbs and placement, was the precise system of correspondences between the planets and the parts of the human body. To the medieval doctor, the body was not just flesh, it was a planetary architecture. Each planet ruled a specific structural component of the human form, and the health of any part of the body depended on the planet that governed it. The medievals took this with absolute seriousness. When a physician treated a patient, they consulted the astrological chart, because they understood that the body was constructed by planetary forces and could only be properly cared for by understanding which forces had built which parts. In this doctrine, Saturn ruled a specific set of body structures. Saturn governed the bones, the entire skeletal system, the load-bearing frame of the human body. Saturn governed the skin, the outermost protective layer, the structural boundary between the inside and the outside. Saturn governed the teeth, the hardest tissue in the body. Saturn governed the joints, the structural articulations that allow movement under load. The pattern is unmistakable. Saturn was the planet of every hard, bearing, enduring component of the body. Every part of you that holds form under pressure. Every part of you that is constructed to last across decades. Every part of you that is, materially, the architecture rather than the soft tissue that fills the architecture in. You are Capricorn. You are ruled by Saturn. And the medievals would have told you, without hesitation, the structural meaning of this fact. The planet that built your nature is the planet that builds the bearing frame of every human body. And Saturn, being your ruler, builds your bearing frame more thoroughly, more durably, more deliberately than it builds it in others. Your bones are not different in their chemical composition, but the relationship between your nervous system, your skeletal frame, and your fundamental sense of self is calibrated to bearing function in a way that other signs are not. You are, in the most literal medieval sense, a body whose ruling planet is the planet of the load-bearing apparatus itself. Your endurance is not a psychological trait you have developed. Your endurance is the basic operating condition of a body whose architect specialized in the structural frame. This is why what breaks others does not break you. Other bodies, when the catastrophe arrives, do not have the same relationship to their bearing frame. They feel the crisis as a threat to the whole organism. Your body feels the crisis as a load, a heavy load, an unpleasant load, but a load. And a load is exactly what your Saturn-built bearing frame was constructed to handle. The skeleton holds, the skin holds, the joints hold. The structural you remains standing while the storm passes through the soft tissue. This is not character. This is anatomy as Saturn arranged it. What I am giving you here is the architecture of why you endure, the Melothesia mechanics by which Saturn rules the bearing frame of every body and rules it most thoroughly in those it claims as its own. Knowing this architecture is awareness. Knowing the seasons of your life when your bearing frame is most needed, the years when the loads are heavier, the windows when your structural function is most active, and the quieter stretches when the architecture rests rather than carries, is power. Because it lets you respect what your body is doing rather than marveling at it after the fact. That timing is what I track on the Patreon. The foundation tier maps the weekly mechanics of the bearing architecture as it operates in your specific chart. The inner circle tier breaks it down by your decade because the relationship between you and your structural frame deepens and shifts across your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and your 50s. Now that you have the Melothesia frame, you will see the bearing architecture operating in places far beyond crisis. You will see it in your daily working life, where colleagues describe ordinary professional pressure as overwhelming. You absorb the same pressures and continue to function. The work that exhausts others gets done quietly by you, day after day. You did not think you were doing anything special. The bearing frame was simply present, holding the load that other frames could not hold. You will see it in your physical body itself, in the way you have probably been the one who does not get sick, or who recovers from illness in a way that surprises the doctors, or who tolerates physical discomfort that other people find unbearable. The body that holds form under emotional load also tends to hold form under physical load. This is the same Saturn architecture operating in the literal flesh. You will see it in long projects, the 15-year endeavor, the slow career build, the marriage that survives the decades-long ordinary erosion of married life. Complete these arcs while others abandon them, not because you are more committed, but because your structural endurance allows commitment to be a long matter rather than a short one. The bearing frame holds the arc. You will see it in grief. When loss arrives, you grieve, yes, sometimes deeply, sometimes silently. But you grieve in a way that does not unmake you. The structural you keeps doing the daily work, even as the emotional you mourns. Other people lose function during grief. You usually do not, and you have sometimes wondered whether you are grieving correctly. You are. You are grieving as a Saturn-built body grieves, with the structure intact and the soft tissue suffering inside it. What you have called your strange capacity to survive was never a mystery. It was the medieval physician's straightforward observation. Saturn rules the bearing frame, and a body built by Saturn carries what bodies built by other planets cannot. Your endurance has been the architecture, working as designed, since before you were old enough to notice it operating. Place your hand at the small of your back, Capricorn. Press gently into the muscle just to either side of the spine. Feel the column of bone that runs from the base of your tailbone up through the lumbar region, into the thoracic spine that runs behind your ribs, all the way up to the cervical spine at the base of your skull. That column is the architecture the medievals knew Saturn built. The medical name is the vertebral column, the column of turnings, and it is composed of 33 vertebrae, each one a small load-bearing element stacked into a single continuous bearing line that has held you upright through every moment of your standing life. Every crisis you have survived, the spine survived first. The spine kept you vertical while the storm passed through. The spine has been the proof in actual bone of what Saturn does to a body it claims. This is not durability as luck. This is endurance as anatomy. The bone-by-bone architecture of a body whose ruling planet specializes in load-bearing frames and whose particular signs carry that specialization in their literal skeletal column. The years you spent surviving what should have broken you were the years your vertebral column was doing exactly what Saturn built it to do, holding form under load. You have been Saturn's bearing frame since the moment your skeleton finished forming in utero. The frame was always going to hold. You were simply waiting to discover what would not break it. The survival is not the problem to be explained. The survival is the architecture, working as designed. What your spine has been quietly doing, your understanding is merely caught up to. So now you walk through your life with the framework in your hands, and several things become possible that were not possible before. You stop attributing your endurance to character traits you can lose. Character traits come and go. Bones do not. Your endurance is in the bones, and the bones are not going anywhere. This understanding gives you a kind of calm in the face of future crises that you did not have before. Not arrogance, not invincibility, but a quiet structural confidence that the bearing frame will probably hold whatever is coming, the way it has always held. You also stop expecting others to endure the way you endure. Other bodies were not built on this bearing frame. When the people around you collapse under loads you would have absorbed, you stop reading their collapse as weakness. They are not weak. They are differently constructed. Their planetary architects built them for other functions, and asking them to endure as you endure is asking a flexible willow to stand like a stone column. You can love them in the right way once you understand they are not failing your standard. They are operating their own structure. And you can stop apologizing internally for the unremarkable way you have absorbed your own life's catastrophes. You did not survive by being heroic. You survived because the body you live in was built to survive. The not collapse was not your virtue. It was your architecture. From now on, when crisis arrives and you find yourself still standing while everything around you falls, you can say, quietly, with neither pride nor confusion, the bearing frame is holding. Saturn built it to hold. The architecture is doing what it has always done. The structure of the bearing frame you carry forever. The timing, when the loads arrive heaviest, when your specific structural function is most active, when the quieter stretches let the architecture rest, is what the Patreon decodes for your specific chart, week by week and decade by decade. Knowing the architecture is awareness. Knowing the timing is power. The bones knew. They have always known. From this point forward, so do you. Master Alistair. Only Capricorn. Only depth.